us how much 6 months worth of rent is for you. Hold it up, take a selfie, and pop it in the comments section on this page. And we want to get a lot of those stories together so that we are well armed when we go up to the National Cabinet to fight for some change. But there's been a lot that we've been hearing that we want to share with you. But Mehreen, tell us a bit about what's happened since we first encountered this crisis and some of the recent decisions that have been made or not been made by the Prime Minister and the Premiers when it comes to renters.
Well, it seems like a lifetime ago, Adam, but it was only a few weeks ago that we started really strongly taking the message that people who rent, people who might suffer because they have lost their jobs, and they needed to have a roof over their head during this time. And our first message was a huge call for the federal government to ban any evictions. And a lot of you joined us, and that's why pretty quickly, we actually got the federal government, the Prime Minister, to announce that there should be a 6-month moratorium on evictions. But that's where they stopped. So they kept promising us all that every time they had a National Cabinet meeting, they would make more announcement on relief for people who were feeling the stress in terms of housing, but they never did. So they had 6 meetings, they kicked the can down the road, and then they said, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, no, this is too hard. So off it went into the too hard basket. And that's really not good enough. Just saying that at the federal level, we're saying ban evictions and then the states can look after the rest is not good enough. The federal government at this point in time has to show leadership and set some uniform standards across Australia, not a patchwork of different states and territories doing different things. So what the states have done, and some still need to pass legislation, is they have also said, yep, we'll ban evictions. But then they've kind of left it to the landlords and the renters, the tenants, to negotiate how that will actually pan out. Okay, evictions might be banned, but also there's a catch in that too. Evictions for COVID-19 reasons are banned, but no grounds evictions are still in play. So for other reasons, and I just heard in Queensland today that a tenant could be kicked out if the owner wants to sell their property. At this point in time, winter approaching, to leave people out in the cold, this is the worst thing that could happen to us, to our community. So different states have different rules. They're not clear, and that's causing such confusion and terrifying, really literally terrifying tenants. I just heard from someone today, just 5 minutes ago, saying that they have told their real estate agent that they won't leave and they can't pay rent, but they are really being harassed, according to them, by the real estate agent who are not willing to reduce the rent and are really pushing them to pay rent. And, there's this huge imbalance between renters and landlords. I just think it's not like you can't go to court. You can't leave this to be settled in court at this point in time, where already there is so much else for people to deal with. So the federal government really needs to come in, show some guts, and that's what we're pushing for.
Well, Scott Morrison's approach has been to say, well, just you sort it out amongst yourselves, right?
Yes,
as if
absolutely.
renters and landlords are somehow equal and able to sit down across a table and negotiate it.
That's right. He's, come good for commercial tenants. So for commercial tenants, there are waivers and, there's a bucket of money there, but nothing for residential tenants. So what we want really is to push for rental holidays, for mortgage holidays for those who need them, a ban on foreclosures for people who can't meet their mortgage payments at this point in time. And really, banks need to play their role as well as the landlord insurers. They need to play a role as well. But who will bring them to the table? That's where the federal government really comes in. That's where Scott Morrison has to come in and say, well, let's come to the table. People just cannot pay this money. How do we deal with this? We can't give people 6 months on to come out with a huge debt.
So let's talk about that, because we want to share with you some of the stories that we've heard, because I think, if you're in the position of if you've got a landlord or an estate agent breathing down your neck, you might be feeling pretty alone at the moment, and we want to let you know that there's lots of people who are in the similar boat, and there are people like your tenants union that you can turn to for help, and that you should turn to for help, and also know that we're fighting for you on the national stage as well, and we need your help with that. So please, if you can tell us what 6 months worth of rent is for you, and take a picture of it, take your selfie, pop it in the comments, that'd be great. But just before we share with you some of the examples and the stories rather that we've been hearing from people, just Mehreen, I mean, you're a housing spokesperson. You understand sort of close up just how cooked the system has been and how it's getting worse. We've got the eviction ban in place, albeit with some loopholes in it that you've referred to, that we need to do everything we can over the next little period to close. But you raised a really important point about what happens in 6 months' time, and that, like, when we're talking about rent holidays, i.e. people should be relieved of the obligation of having to pay rent in some situations if they can't afford it. Like, that's really important too, that we don't just find ourselves in 6 months with people not being able to pay, not getting kicked out, but then a landlord turning around in 6 months and saying, well, I know you haven't got a job and you might not have been eligible for the federal government's JobKeeper package because you're a casual or you don't meet those criteria, but now we'd like 6 months rent, please. I mean, that's a big looming problem as well, yeah?
Yes, and that's absolutely right. And we cannot allow that to happen. And that's what the rental holidays are about. I mean, we have to come up with a solution where people can't pay rents, don't have to pay rents. We also want to make sure that there is no increase in rents, because that price gouging might start happening as well after the crisis is over. So we want to make sure that rents are actually frozen, what they are now, till at least the end of the year as well.
Yeah, so let's just to hear what this actually means. Like, it's all well and good for the government to talk about numbers of people who are in, and we have to draw the line somewhere, and we can't step up and look after everyone. But I think they need to hear the message about what it actually means practically. And Charlene in Redfern, for example, she got in touch with us and shared her story, which we want to take up to Scott Morrison. The rent for their whole place per month in Sydney was $3,400, right? Now, that was split 3 ways, but 2 housemates had to move back home. Like, I don't know their situation, but, the government is saying international students, for example, should go and should leave. There's lots of people who are now having to leave the place that they were staying at. So she's there now by herself with $3,400 a month hanging over her head. And she's told us that she faces being homeless. We all had well-paying jobs, but due to the virus, all of us lost work. But I am now in the apartment on my own, facing a huge unpayable debt and possible bankruptcy. Like, this is I really feel for Charlene, because this is just an amazing turn of events that's happened because of something completely out of her control and out of her housemates' control. They've lost their jobs, or they've all lost their jobs, and now she's got this huge debt over her head, and she faces being homeless. It's a terrible story that I think the government probably doesn't understand how serious this is for people.
There should be clear provisions, firstly, for landlords to reduce rents, and they haven't been provided at the state-by-state level or at the federal level. There should also be a provision for Commonwealth rent assistance to be increased in cases like this. So, maybe the rent doesn't need to be reduced by as much if rent assistance is provided. And, at the end of the day, this is the time when people most need to have a home for health reasons, for social reasons. And this situation is already exacerbating people's, fragile mental health as well at this point in time. So there's so many factors which kind of really justify the need to have rental holidays, for more Commonwealth rent assistance, to make sure that there are regulations around landlords reducing rents.
Yeah.
I might relate another story, Adam, about Jasmine in Surrey Hills, which is really my neighborhood. So my husband and I are both unable to work, Jasmine says, because of COVID-19 and similar situation for millions of others. The support payments, she says, helps, but they are really a fraction of the income that they had before. And really, they have to make a decision, all those really difficult choices for what to pay for, what to not pay for, who to pay, who not to pay. Yes, we won't get evicted, she said, if we don't pay rent. But when this is over, we're going to be in more debt than we have ever been before. And that's a terrifying prospect for those two people. So Jasmine's calling for a rent holiday.
Yeah,
we are as well.
Yeah, and it's like it's what we need, and it's like it's worth bearing in mind the point that you made before, that the government sprung into action for businesses who've got to pay rent. And yeah, look, we support small businesses who are in trouble with their big, powerful landlords also getting assistance as well. But you just look at the speed with which they acted for businesses to sort them out, and big businesses as well in the shopping centres and the like. And they seem to just be leaving renters behind. It's almost as if they've made a decision that they just don't care and that they're going to wipe their hands of it. But the point that you made is right. Like, this is a stressful time, and everyone is being urged to stay home, right? Everyone's being told stay where you are, and your home is meant to be your secure place, and the home is meant to be the place where you're looking after each other, you're looking after the people that you're close to, you're making sure everyone is doing everything they need to protect themselves against the virus, and all of a sudden it becomes a place of stress. And I think people generally have been willing to accept a lot of the social restrictions that have come along with this, because we understand it's all about keeping people alive and keeping people healthy, and that's good. But the quid pro quo has got to be getting looked after yourself as well. And like Raoul in Canberra said, he got in touch to say, kudos to the government and the PM for all the work done so far, but we can't focus on this issue alone. I've been stood down, although getting help from the government, but it's not sufficient for me to pay my rent alone. The realtors have been understanding, but if I have to pay the rent later, how's it helping me? Where the regulations are easier, there will still be very limited work out there. Like, so in other words, he's making the point that in a few months' time, probably a lot of people who are renting might be in jobs that have just been totally smashed by coronavirus, and now they're going to be asked, he's going to say, how am I going to pay my outstanding rent? And it's a real issue. Like, everyone's presuming the jobs are there, but they might not be, right, in 6 months' time. So you might have a debt and not be able to find a job, and the government's telling us that that's when all of these assistance payments are going to run out.
And this is a good point, which kind of also points towards how over the years we have sold our public housing. And there's a real dearth of public housing in Australia across all states and territories. And this is where we need to make decisions about federal government actually investing in housing for all. Because we're in this for the long haul. Yes, we will get through this in the next few months, hopefully. And only because, as you said, Adam, our community has shown really strong responsibility. We are doing so much better than most countries around the world because everyone took responsibility, and the rate of infection is reducing. But government has to pitch in as well and support our community. And part of that is the short-term support in terms of rental holidays, and part of that is the long-term picture, where we really need to build a lot more public housing than we have at the moment.
Yeah, that's right. And let's remember, we said before that Scott Morrison's response has been to say, oh, well, I hope that there'll be some common sense and that landlords and renters sit down around a table and work it out. And I think I'd like Scott Morrison to hear the story, hear Vanessa's situation. She's in Burwood East, not far from me in Victoria. Here's what happened to her. So trying to do what Scott Morrison has said, I asked for $75 a week off a $2,360 per month rental as I lost a percentage of my income. They won't even give me that. I've lost a third of my income. We've never been late with rent. We are a mature married couple, and my income loss has stretched me financially. I didn't think I was asking for much, but they have only offered me a payment plan which will put me into future debt that I can't afford to repay. and it's it kind of, you know, Scott Morrison says common sense. That actually to me sounds like actually common sense. What happens when renters go and try and talk to estate agents and landlords? It's not a level playing field.
Absolutely not. I mean, what world do you think that could work well? There's obviously a huge power imbalance, and it leaves already vulnerable people up to exploitation. Yeah. I have a story, Adam, here from Sadia in East Hills in New South Wales. And Sadia has received her notice of termination from her real estate agent due to non-payment. Sadia says that she has to find a new place and leave by the 23rd of April, which is in 2 days. She says she's lost 100% of her income as she worked in the entertainment industry. And we know how much our artists and entertainers are suffering during this time. So she said she was the first one to be impacted by the restrictions. She's not eligible for job seeker payment. She's a single mom with no help, no savings. I mean, it is heartbreaking to hear these stories. So she said, I've explained to both my landlord and agent about the situation, but they keep saying that their landlord is not able to help them with reducing the rent. I don't even know my rights, like where do I go and what can I do? And I think it's really important, as you mentioned earlier, Adam, the tenants unions are the place to go. They have done some incredible work. In New South Wales, at least, the government has given them some extra funding to be able to help more people. So I think it's really important that tenants know their rights. And especially I fear for international students who, you know, often are not told what their rights are, who are in these situations as well. But I guess in terms of people who and there are people who for whom it's difficult to make their mortgage repayments, so they're relying on the rent to make those payments, and that's where the mortgage holidays come into play as well. You know, our big four banks especially have the capacity to do that now, and where banks don't, I think the government should step in. And provide support there, and make sure that at the end of the crisis, the time to make repayments is extended.
Yeah. So, and I just we've got a couple of questions coming in that I want to get to very shortly, and just to share with you all just a couple of final stories from people who, and I can't stress enough how powerful it's been to have people share their stories with us. It makes a difference when we go to Canberra and in the States to argue for these things. For Jess in Kensington, she says, we live in Kensington, been in the place 6 years, but just before lockdown, our housemate moved to South Australia. It's been 6 weeks and we still don't have a replacement housemate, despite doing our best job to find someone. Yeah, pretty tough to find a housemate at the moment. We can't afford to cover the extra rent as my other housemate lost his job and doesn't qualify for JobKeeper, right? There's 1 million people who don't qualify for JobKeeper because they're casuals employed for less than 12 months. And we know that half of those are young people as well. The government's just turned their back on them. We don't know what's going to happen if we don't pay it. Our agent isn't responded to our queries, and we're nervous about talking to our landlord about rent reduction in case they say no. And Maddie in Brisbane, this is happening right across the country, said, as the eviction freeze was announced, before we even contacted our real estate agent regarding any rental reductions, we received an email. It stated that while they couldn't kick us out for 6 months, if we didn't pay the full rent amount, we would be blacklisted and therefore struggle to ever rent again or obtain any loans. We were told to go to Centrelink and access our super. All unpaid rent would accumulate and there are no excuses. It sounded like a threat and it worked. We don't feel safe in our rental agreement during COVID-19. Now, this New South Wales, only New South Wales, they're the only ones who said that they've got any plans for a blacklisting. But can I just say, especially to Maddie, like real estate agents should not be telling you to go and dig into your super. And if the corporate watchdog has warned people on that. So if you're hearing that, again, you've got to get in touch with your tenants union, because some of the things that we've been relaying to you, the stories that we've been hearing from people, they're not right, they're potentially unlawful. And even though the government's got a bit of a way to go, some of these things they've already outlawed. I'm just there's a couple of questions come in, and I'll get you to respond to a couple of those, Mehreen. Can I say, for those of you who've been trying to upload selfies, apparently there's a difficulty uploading selfies in the comments section, so please send them through info@adambandt.com. If you can take a picture, info@adambandt.com. If you can take a picture of yourself with a sign showing what 6 months worth of rent means to you, so that we can put them all together and give the government an understanding of just how big this problem is. Mehreen, David said, my real estate agent wants to increase our rent. Can that still happen under these new laws? What do you know about what's happening around the country? Because it'd probably be different things in different states, wouldn't it?
It is. So as far as I understand, New South Wales and Tasmania have not frozen rents, but the other states have. And we'll keep pushing for New South Wales and Tasmania to do that as well. So if you are in any of the other states, then they cannot actually increase rent. So you should contact your tenants union or the tribunal to make sure that they can't do that.
Yeah. And thanks, David, for your comment. Kevin said one big problem, even with an eviction moratorium, is that once that finishes, if a person is renting through a real estate agent, they risk being blacklisted on a tenancy database, which makes it impossible to rent in the future. Maddie, in Brisbane situation.
Absolutely. And in New South Wales, that cannot happen. There might be maybe South Australia, it can't happen as well. But again, you need to check with either your local MP. If it's a Greens MP, please feel free and knock on the, call them and ask them. But you should check with your local MP. You should check with your tenants union on that as well. And that's what we're pushing for as well. All our MPs in different states are really pushing hard for that to become law, that during this time, no one should be able to be blacklisted if they don't pay their rent.
Yeah, and it's an important thing. We've been talking about there's some big holes that we're trying to get the government to fill because they haven't been as good for residential tenants as they have been for big businesses. But you do have some rights. We have been able to secure you some rights, especially in places like New South Wales and Tasmania. It was the Greens that got laws passed to secure you some rights. South Australia, there's been some really good things happening as well. So yes, they may give you these threats, but Mehreen's point is really important. You do have rights as well during this time, and it might be that what the agent or the landlord is trying to do to you is in fact not allowed. And so find out before you do anything. Or if you know anyone who's in that situation, they've got local MPs to talk to, they've got a tenants union to talk to. You've got to make the inquiries, so don't let them get away and bully people. Yep, we've got to get more protections, but there are some protections there already. Lisa has picked up on something that you've said before about the banks. Banks need to do their part too. Too big to fail and massive profits. And, we helped them out. Big banks did very well, and probably now it's their time to turn around and perhaps, Mehreen, help some of those. There might be some landlords who can't pay their mortgage, and so the banks might be able to help them out. And also potentially it's time for banks to step up and help some renters too who are falling behind, or people who've got mortgages to pay themselves.
Absolutely. Can't agree with you more. And that's what we're pushing for. But you know what? They have to be brought to the table by the federal government. We have to tell them that this is not acceptable. And this is what government wants you to do. They've made how many zillions in profit from all of us over the years. And now it's their time to support their clients, to be frank.
Yeah,
there's no other way out of this.
That's right. Karen's posted, given us a distressing comment as well. Thanks, Karen, for joining us tonight. My landlord refuses to negotiate the notice to vacate that I got in February before I was stood down, so I guess before a lot of this really hit. The real estate agent even put up a sign out the front regarding the auction. I'm so stressed out. I'm not even asking for a decrease in rent, just asking for some extra time. Right? It really brings it home that this is actually about whether someone's going to have a roof over their head or not. It's not about a contract. It's not about some notional things about whether or not we're going to give some people assistance or not give other people assistance, and where do we draw the line in the sand. It's about whether someone's going to have a roof over their head and how they'll feel about living in their home.
Absolutely. And Adam, sorry, Karen, I'm so sorry to hear your story. And this is exactly what we were talking about earlier. This is the issue of the power imbalance, and leaving it up to landlords and real estate agents and renters to talk about this just doesn't cut it at all. There have to be regulations. There has to be a very strict advice provided, and rules set around how to do this. I think the one thing which it has also reminded me when you're talking about a roof over your head is the number of homeless people without a home in Australia. And at this time, I think they are the most vulnerable. So I understand that South Australia has actually provided a home in hotels for all those people. And other state governments should also pull their weight and make sure that there is no one without a home at this point in time, and from this point in time into the future.
A couple of weeks ago, we were helping in my office two or three women who are homeless. They're pregnant, and at the moment, they're going to have a baby without having a fixed address. So it'll be in crisis accommodation, or they'll be moved around from place to place. And now it's happening during a coronavirus health crisis as well, where there's isolation and you really need the security of a place to live. And I think that the people who have already been facing homelessness, and it's been on the rise because governments haven't built new public and social housing, it's just stagnated over years. This is what we said at the start. It's when a crisis hits, you realise the cracks in the system and all the people who've been left behind. And I think one thing that we should all commit to doing, when we come out the other side of this, and there will be another side to the other side of this, these restrictions aren't going to last forever, we shouldn't just go back to the way it was before. We should say that this has exposed some flaws in our current system, and too many people have been left without a roof over their head and left. We haven't had enough crisis housing. We don't have enough homes for people. But also people are going to be looking for work. We're going to be looking for ways to kickstart the economy. It just seems to make a lot of sense and to call the boxes to say, as part of a Green New Deal, let's build 500,000 new public and social homes so that everyone gets a roof over their head. We'll get people back in jobs, we'll get the economy kickstarted again, and we'll make ourselves more equal in the process.
Oh, absolutely, Adam. And, we will be pushing with every force that we have, with every, ounce of determination that we have to make sure that is the outcome. But we are still trying to fix the situation now for as many people as we can, and we'll be taking all your messages with us to the federal government, to Scott Morrison, put them right in front of them and ask them to deal with this, to address this issue as soon as possible. But like Adam said earlier, a reminder for you to please calculate your rent for the next 26 weeks and take a selfie and let us know how difficult it is going to be for people who can't pay rent now and will be left in huge debt after that. We will not accept that at any point in time. And that will really help us put the message out there. So I think it's time for us to wrap up, Adam.
Yeah, and I just want to say thanks to all the people who shared their stories with us. I know it's not necessarily an easy thing to do. We're politicians. We're used to getting up and talking in public and going in Parliament and going on Facebook and so on. But to share your story like Karen tonight about the stress that's causing her, and all the other people over the last few weeks who've shared their stories with us, it's a big thing, but it's a really powerful thing. And it helps us go and fight in Canberra and right around the country to make sure that everyone gets a roof over their head. So please keep them coming in, info@adambandt.com, if you can take those pictures, those selfies that Mehreen was talking about. Tell us what 6 months worth of rent is, what it actually means for you, so that we can start to get that message up to the Prime Minister and the others. But know that throughout all of this, every politician has been saying, we're all in this together, and it's true. But what that actually means is looking out for people and actually doing something about it. It's easy words for Scott Morrison to say, And what we've now got to do is actually hold him to it and say, well, if you're going to say that, then you've got to make sure that at the most basic level, everyone's got a roof over their head.
And being in this together doesn't mean that millions of people are left behind.
That's right. So, look, thanks all for joining us. And thanks, Mehreen. Really nice to see you. Perhaps one day, sometime soon, we might get to be in the same place again together. And I'm sure every one of you is hanging out to see your friends and family again. And we know it. We feel it. But thanks, everyone, for doing what you're doing. We are managing to beat the crisis, beat the coronavirus. But let's make sure that as we do it, we'll keep fighting to make sure everyone's got a roof over their head. So from me, thanks, everyone, and we'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.
Yeah. Thanks, Adam, and thanks, everyone. Look after yourself. Stay well. Stay safe. Bye.